ask you about a report by ProPublica yesterday that USAID, which is a government agency, delivered an assessment to you in late April that Israel was deliberately blocking humanitarian aid into Gaza. You testified before Congress in May that you did not believe that the U.S. did not assess that that was the case. How do you explain that disconnect?
You know, this is pretty normal. We get from different parts of my own department, different parts of the government, different assessments on any given issue, and that was the case here. So we heard from different offices in the State Department, USAID, et cetera. My job is to kind of sort through that, draw some conclusions from it, and act accordingly, and that's what I did.
Stacey Gilbert, a State Department employee of more than 20 years, said she resigned after the administration released the NSM report this month, which she said was wrong. She said a draft of the report had said clearly that Israel was blocking humanitarian assistance, but that subject matter experts were removed and it was edited at a higher level before being published with the conclusion that Israel was not blocking assistance. What was the reason for the change to this conclusion, and do you have any comment on this?
So first, let me just say I'm not going to comment on personnel issues, but we have been clear that we welcome diverse points of view and believe it makes us a stronger department, and it makes and leads to a stronger policy-making process. I'll also just say is that we stand by the National Security Memorandum 20 report. We are not an administration or a department that twists the facts, and allegations that we have are unfounded. But this is, as any report and as any process that is undertaken in a policymaking process, these processes are deliberative and they involve inputs from people at a variety of seniority and expert levels.
I wanted to go to another clip of the State Department spokesperson Matt Miller saying the Biden administration has not found Israel's actions in Gaza to be a violation of international law. This is some of what he said.
We have not found them to be in violation of international humanitarian law, either when it comes to the conduct of the war or when it comes to the provision of humanitarian assistance.
That was this week in El Shiline. Either violation of international law or when it comes to providing humanitarian assistance. And yet President Biden says he is building a port because the Palestinians cannot get enough aid.
Exactly. I think that the evidence speaks for itself. We've had, not only the ICJ's ruling, not only the UN Security Council ruling. Clearly, the administration is unwilling to admit to reality.
On the NSM 20 issue, Tim Reiser, who basically wrote the Leahy statute way back, said that Israel has violated the Leahy law consistently, always. Now, you guys say here that Israel did not get preferential treatment and so on, but according to the author of this document, Israel has always done that. Do you have any comment on that?
There are all sorts of people outside of government who have drawn various conclusions one way or the other, and you see them offering those opinions in the press, as is their right to do all the time. I can tell you that is not a conclusion that we have reached.
Okay, but that's the guy that wrote the book, right?
He is, and and I will just tell you, on behalf of the United States government, we have not reached that conclusion.
The premise of your answer seems to be, your first answer seems to be that the Americans have been talking, have been influencing. What are American words worth these days? What is American influence worth?
I think American influence is worth quite a bit, and it is because of American engagement and American leadership and American diplomacy, specifically by this secretary and by this president, that we have seen things unfold in a certain way. We have seen humanitarian aid be unlocked.
One more quick question on this.
So, was this an independent U.S. investigation to decide whether or not Israel had broken international humanitarian law, or was this a U.S. investigation aided by the Israelis?
The Israelis were not involved in the production of the United States' National Security Memorandum.
That's not an answer to the question.
Go ahead.
It would make a mockery of the entire National Security Memorandum number 20 if they found those assurances to be credible at this time.
It's hard not to feel a little cynical about how the White House will determine the credibility of the assurances from Israel. As I said, it's not really clear that Israel can be trusted in this moment. On Friday, though, you had the National Security Council, John Kirby, jumping the gun, saying that the Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, has already, quote, determined the information provided was credible and reliable. He later had to walk back his remarks, saying he, quote, misspoke, and that Blinken has not yet made a determination.
I was, Eamon, very surprised to learn about that Kirby statement, because just a short time before that, I spoke directly to Secretary Blinken while he was on his way home from Israel, where he assured me that they would take into consideration the concerns that I and the other senators had.
You know, there has been a large amount of criticism and skepticism as to how Israel is waging this war in the wake of the deaths of those 7 humanitarians this past week. Yes. You said on Tuesday the U.S. has not found any incidents where the Israelis have violated international law. How far-reaching is the U.S. investigation of Israel?
I wouldn't call it a U.S. investigation of Israel. We have a normal process the State Department runs and governs, where they take a look at incidents, particularly those that are being operations being conducted by partner countries, and they look at them and they assess them against international law. And they're doing that in real time, Margaret. So some of them they've looked at and concluded. Some they're still looking at.
They may be in violation of international law.
Thus far, as I said the other day, we've not seen any indication that they have violated international humanitarian law. But we take this seriously. They take it seriously at the State Department, and we'll keep looking at this.
Well, the Secretary General of Doctors Without Borders rejected Israel's explanation of what happened in that World Central Kitchen attack.
Yeah.
Because he lost staff in Gaza, as have other humanitarians, more than 200 dead to date. Take a listen.
We do not accept it because what has happened to World Central Kitchen and MSF's convoys and shelters is part of the same pattern of deliberate attacks on humanitarians, health workers, journalists, UN personnel, schools and homes. This is not just about implementing an effective deconfliction mechanism. Our movements and locations are shared, coordinated and identified already. This is about impunity, a total disregard for the laws of war, and now it must become about accountability.
Can you categorically say that relevant authorities in the Israeli government are not restricting humanitarian assistance to reach Gaza?
Again, that's not the policy. As I've said repeatedly, we've seen over these 7 or 8 months now a clear gap.
16,000 kids dead! 16,000 kids dead! You're a butcher! I'm not resisting! You're a butcher! People stand up against this genocidal animal! He's a genocidal animal!
Committee will suspend while the Capitol Police restore order. May continue.
Yes, thank you. We are determined to do everything possible to make sure that people who so desperately need this aid get this aid. And when it comes to the policies of the government, we're focused on those. When individuals make these statements, we've condemned them. Sure.
ICC accuses Netanyahu and Gallant of causing extermination, starvation of civilians as a method of war, deliberately targeting civilians. Do you think those things are not happening in Gaza?
We don't. We have made clear that there have been steps that we wanted Israel to take to improve the delivery of humanitarian assistance that for a time they weren't taking.
I wanted to quote further what you've said in explanation of why you're resigning. You said you're haunted by the final social media post of Aaron Bushnell, the 25-year-old U.S. Air Force serviceman who self-immolated in front of the Israeli embassy in Washington on February 25th. You quote him, "Many of us like to ask ourselves, what would I do if I was alive during slavery or the Jim Crow South or apartheid? What would I do if my country was committing genocide?" The answer is you're doing it right now. If you can explain what that meant to you and how people have responded to you.
Sorry. You know, that post, I think, spoke to me and many people who had to really look at what they were doing and whether, you know, for me, I have a young daughter, and I thought about in the future if she were to ask me, you know, what were you doing when this was happening? You were at the State Department. I want to be able to tell her that I didn't stay silent,